Well, hello everybody, and welcome to this final photography video before we head off into the summer holidays. I hope you have a lovely summer holidays when it comes. Um, in this video, what we are hoping to put across is, first of all, the learning intention is to understand how to skillfully make use of scale within photographs. Scale, that's from large to small, as you can see what I've done with my cool title at the top. The success criteria, firstly, explain what this scale is, that should say what scale is in relation to photography. And explain how scale can be used to create interesting photographs. Find examples of the use of scale within photographs. And then finally, take photographs that demonstrate the use of scale. So that is our success criteria. So what is scale within photography? I don't want to patronise you. I'm sure that you all understand what scale actually means in general terms. But we're going to have a little think about photography. So scale is the size of one object relative to another. In photography, we have a huge impact on the way we represent the scale of a place or object by the way we photograph it. We can basically play around with perspective. Great photos are less about chance and more about knowing how to use the tools at your disposal to make the photo you want to create become reality. And I'm going to show you some examples. So firstly, if we think about how we can make a subject appear smaller, we can quite simply photograph it from above. So you can do this with portraiture by having the camera at a higher vantage point. Really simple. Or you can play around with perspective and make a subject appear to be taller than what they actually are. So if you look at this photograph of an infant in a cot, you can see that they've been photographed at a low vantage point, which makes them look absolutely huge, which in reality is not the case. And there's lots of ways that you can play around with scale with your photographs. You can obviously use miniature figures like in this photograph to make the objects appear to be much larger than what they are in reality. Or you can play around with scale by having something that's large next to something that's not so large, like in this photograph. Or you can even place your subject matter in an environment that's much bigger to emphasise scale. So if you look at this portrait of a woman, she is standing in a very large environment, which makes her appear to be much smaller than what she is in reality. By photographing someone in an environment, you can show the environment off as being huge, as being, immersive, as being powerful. And there's lots of really fun things that you can do when you're playing around with scale. You can play around with what we call forced perspective, which you can see in this photograph by having one object closer to the camera than the other, like you see in the Hobbit films. And this can almost create the illusion of the hand being bigger than the person in the background. So forced perspective is a really fun way to play around with scale. Lots of people go to the Leaning Tower of Pisa to do forced perspective shots, like this guy here. Has anyone ever done that before? Everyone that goes to Pisa does it. This photographer called Martin Parr took this really funny photograph of people doing their forced perspective shots at the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It's a pretty funny image. And within this photograph, you can see that the vastness of the location has been emphasised through the smaller man-made structures that are evident within the photograph. You can see a bridge and some houses, some cabins, some automobiles, and these make the landscape look a lot more vast, and it emphasises the vastness of the landscape. And you can actually use different photographic equipment to change how big the backgrounds appear to be in photographs. So for example, if you use a 35mm lens, you will just see the view for how you would see it with the human eye. don't see much of a difference. The same as with a 50mm lens. You can see the difference when you use a wide angle lens. You can see that the subject in the foreground seems to be a lot larger, and the building in the background seems to be smaller, and that is the effect of using a wide angle lens. And we've got one of them in the school which you can have a shot of when we get back to class. And what you can do is you can see the photograph on the right hand side of the photograph. The photographer has photographed a subject from a low angle, and they've done this coupled with the use of a wide angle lens, which again enhances the height of the building, which is really, really interesting. And if you use a telezoom lens, what will happen is that the subject in the foreground will seem a lot smaller, and the subject in the background will seem closer to you, to the audience, and also larger. It brings the background forward, basically. And if you use a telezoom lens, what often happens is that the depth from the photograph is kind of taken away. Now, I understand you don't have this equipment at home, but you can achieve similar things with mobile phones. So here's our final thought. Why is scale important? Scale is one of the most important ways to add drama to a photograph. Not knowing how to accurately represent scale of a place can leave us as photographers frustrated that our images don't represent what we saw. So, example might be if you're taking a landscape photograph and you're in a field and you think, oh, this is a beautiful landscape, and then you get back and you check your photograph and you've not managed to capture the vastness of the landscape. So good use of scale in a photograph can make the viewer ponder the size of the world and how small they are in comparison. It can make us marvel, and I think that's a good point to sort of end on. I'm quickly going to show you the form that I need you to fill out this week. But after the video, you'll see a video about a photographer called Slinkerchu who uses scale in an interesting way. So please watch that at the end of this, because it'll give you some interesting ideas. And if you can just fill in the Google form as usual. Again, it's a similar task as watch the video about Slinkerchu, which you're about to see next. Find photographs that represent scale and then upload your own photographs. And I very much look forward to seeing your responses to the activity. So good luck and have fun. Have a nice holiday.
I really did like the idea that 99.9% of people is not find these at all. Whereas one person might walk along and glance down and happen to see something there and be confused as to why there was a little figure stuck in some chewing gum or falling down a drain or whatever. I customise train set figures and then leave them on the streets for people to discover. After I leave the figures on the street and take photographs of them, they're left there, either the people to find or to be destroyed or lost. Often I don't really know what happens to the work. I very rarely go back to check, so it's as much a mystery for me as what happens to the figures as it is to anyone else. It seemed like it was the opposite of every other type of street art. Everything was very big and brash and designed to be seen, and I really wanted to do something that wasn't, that was hidden and lost and secret almost. The figures being small lend themselves to building this world where you have the miniatures being ignored and forgotten and lost on the street. And I do feel that that reflects how people feel in a big city, often being ignored. Even though there's thousands of people, millions of people around you, you can feel lost in amongst those people. Everyone's kind of anonymous, you don't know your next door neighbour. That's really what I wanted to explore with the work. People in different countries all around the world really find the images relevant for their lives. I think the idea of having your insecurities on show, I think, is obviously relevant for a lot of people in this day and age.
Hey, NBC News viewers, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.